The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. It is April 3rd, Thursday. Welcome to the podcast. Well, we have new developments in the Nashville shooter, Audrey Hale. Apparently, the police can't figure out a motive, but we can. And they're going to talk about Trump's end to globalization in one fell swoop in one day, the day of liberation, where the United States will no longer be held at gunpoint by corporate multinationals. All right, let's get into the headlines. The headline countdown for today, April 3rd. All right, we're going to start with the Wall Street Journal. Trump tariffs aim to bring down curtain on the end of globalization. Excuse me. Trump tariffs aim to bring down curtain on era of globalization. The president wants companies to return production to the U.S., but it won't be easy. And then Reuters has the headline, Trump signs order ending duty-free treatment for cheap shipments from China. U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Wednesday that closes a trade loophole known as de minimis that allows low-value packages from China and Hong Kong to enter the United States without duty or duty-free, which means taxes or tariffs. So he's closing that loophole, and we're starting to see exactly what's happening here. So going back to the original headline, Trump tariffs aim to bring down curtain on era of globalization, is absolutely true. Yes, he wants to bring back production to the United States because it was actually the multinational corporations which sold out the American middle class, the people that worked in factories and manufacturing, sold out their employment to communist China, who basically works on slave labor to some extent. They do get compensated, but at a very low wage. So the whole idea was to move manufacturing away from unionized fair wage to countries that offer a poor wage. And in some cases, like in China, we're actually feeding the beast that is our enemy. Why would we do that? Why would the corporate oligarchy want that to happen? Because they don't care about your freedom, your individual rights, and so forth and so on. So this is really retaliating against the communist Chinese who are at war with us and have been in a fifth generational sense for some time. So Trump now is deciding to reassert America's strength in trade, in market, as well as militarily, and we'll see how that transpires. The goal is to de-escalate with Russia and reassert with China, and to make it look fair, It really isn't fair when we look at the numbers. But to make it look fair, he goes, well, we're going to do tariffs on everybody. So it doesn't look like it's directed at China. But let's go back to the news. Wall Street Journal reports tariff news, April 2nd. This is from yesterday. Trump unveils sweeping levies and stark shift in trade policy. Trading partners face a 10% rate or higher. Stock index futures fell sharply in response because most people are saying don't look at the stock market because stock market is run by corporate interest. And so obviously this is detriment to corporate interest. And although we do need business corporations need to be reined in just as much as China does. All right, this is a republic, the American people, not corporate heads and corporate boards, but the American people overall have to realize that it's not just the communist Chinese that are your enemy, but also multinational corporations that don't have any allegiance, fealty, whatever you want to call it, to the United States. Wall Street Journal again, Trump tariffs aim to create a new world economic order. The announcement Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the Rose Garden stunned markets. It could also push countries, including the U.S., to the brink of recession. Now, we're going to look at the reciprocal tax in just a second, but there's certain things that we have to consider first. Back to the Wall Street Journal. China's tariff dodging move to Mexico looks doomed. Chinese firms invested billions of dollars in Mexican factories to make products for the American market. Shipping goods tariff-free under a U.S. trade pact now in peril. Well, what does that mean? That means, so what happened? Back in 2016, during the first Trump term, Trump put tariffs on China, our biggest problem. And we dealt with the Soviet Union also in the same similar fashion where you build a slave economy in communism and then you move all your manufacturing there. So Trump's tariffs on China were so popular because they are an adversary. And as I mentioned previously, we built this beast. Not just ideologically, but economically as well. So the tariffs were so popular amongst the electorate that Biden was forced to keep them in. Well, what did China do? China said, well, we're going to then build lots of factories in Mexico. And presumably those products can go into America using the USMCA duty-free, tariff-free. Well, Trump said you're not going to do that. You're not going to flood the market with Chinese-made goods at the peril of the U.S. economy. So when Trump was reelected, he made that perfectly clear, and he was elected also on that promise. New York Post is reporting Trump slaps at least 10% tariffs on almost all imports in declaration of economic independence. And if you looked at what he was doing, basically, he was reciprocal, but not at the same rate. So the countries that charge us the most, he also charges the most, but about half of what they charge. So he pulled back from his initial proposal about being reciprocal in a sense, but in a diminutive fashion. Let's look at some of these charts that he had in the Rose Garden yesterday. So look at China. China charges 67%, and this is a total of VAT, tariffs, etc. The total tariff charge to the USA, and then it says in the fine print there how they come to that number. So the U.S. is going to be charging them half of that. So it is reciprocal in a sense. The European Union is 39%. We're going to charge half. Vietnam charges us 90%. We're going to charge half. Moldova charges 61%. We're going to charge half. So along the line, countries that charge us 10%, which is a minimum levy, will be charged reciprocal 10%. So Trump's idea is to get it all down to 10% and then to get rid of them completely. So the idea is initially is to protect markets, just like everybody else is protecting their markets. The U.S. has the most valuable market, so we seek to protect it as leverage, and then we'll go from there. But the idea is to be protective, and then, like they said, free trade isn't fair trade, because the fact is when you call for free trade, you just say nobody has to pay to get their products into the U.S. market. And that shouldn't be the case, particularly with China. Reuters is reporting China urges U.S. to immediately lift tariffs, vows retaliation. China firmly opposes this and will take countermeasures to safeguard its own rights and interests. Well, the United States can't safeguard its own rights and interests. The ministry said the world's largest economy is set to spiral deeper into trade war that stands to upend global supply chains, only because we make everything in China. Trump on Wednesday announced China would be hit with 34% tariff on top of the 20% he over previously imposed earlier this year, bringing the total new levies to 54% and close to the 60% figure he had threatened while on the campaign trail. Chinese exporters like those from other economies around the world will face a 10% baseline tariff as part of the new 34% levy. Almost all goods shipped to the world's largest consumer economy, which is us, really, Saturday, before remaining higher reciprocal tariffs take effect from April 9th. So there's even more coming. But if you look at the landscape here, what you're seeing is this is directed at China. And China is our adversary, and we manufacture very important goods there, like antibiotic that we, in case of a war, we'd be cut off. So what would happen if China decided to dump their treasuries or to attack Taiwan or to do anything else that would be considered warfare? So we have to up the ante here. The average U.S. tariff on Chinese goods will be 76%, according to Chad Brown, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics and chief economist for the State Department for the last year of the Biden administration. So you can't trust what he's going to say anyway, so I wouldn't. Some countries targeted by Trump tariffs seek negotiations. China says there's no winners in trade wars. A lot of countries have already said we're dropping tariffs. Global leaders react to Trump's Liberation Day tariffs with disappointment, threats, and calls for negotiation. Rob Ford, the governor of Ontario, or Doug Ford, already said that he's willing to take tariffs to zero, and Israel already has. While several allies articulated their frustration with the tariffs, they also expressed a lack of interest in launching trade wars. Many called for negotiations with new trade agreements with the U.S. And Scott Bessent yesterday said, you better not escalate because you're going to lose. So he said, accept the tariff and negotiate. And that is the way to end this. And it's a good stance to take. We're holding all the cards. As Trump said to Zelensky, you have no cards. And he doesn't. So as I mentioned previously, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced on Tuesday that this country would preemptively lift all tariffs on U.S. goods. However, Trump still announced a 70% reciprocal tariff on Israel. I think it's all going to work out for the better. The main focus is China. Don't forget. He's doing blanket to make it seem like China, don't be mad. We're doing this to everybody. And some of the reasoning behind what Trump is doing was laid out on Jesse Waters' primetime last night, and Real Clear Politics covers what Jesse Waters says in a headline. Jesse Waters, media says America cannot afford tariffs. We cannot afford not to have tariffs. Jesse Waters said last night, Trump fundamentally changed the country as we know it. This is the biggest shift in economic policy since the end of World War II. When we liberated Europe and Asia, 47 says we are now liberating ourselves from globalization. It is the death knell, because what fueled America's decline versus, let's say, China or the world's, or most particularly, what made corporations more rich, was the fact that we were selling out America, the American worker most specifically. So Waters went on to say the United States finally won the Cold War, gave birth to globalization, and then other countries, even our allies, took advantage of us, took advantage of the system we designed to save and protect them. The idea, the same thing was with China, that, we're going to invite them in the WTO. They're going to become a trading partner, and they are going to become like us. Well, they didn't. They became even more intransigent, willing to change, recalcitrant. Waters also went on to say China, a country we basically created, became an absolute menace. American multinationals conspired to shift jobs and factories overseas and decimate the middle class. You are one of those workers. The last 40 years, free trade basically destroyed your life. The top 50% of income earners, especially the top 10%, accumulated a massive amount of wealth. But the other half of the country, the bottom 50% of earners, have been suffocating at the bottom. And the only time they had wage growth since the 70s was under Trump last time. More news from Fox News. Senate approves resolution against Trump's Canada tariffs hours after Liberation Day event. 4 Republicans side with Democrat resolution against Trump's tariffs. And then we have a headline from OAN, One American News. Trump blasts disloyal GOP senators over potentially voting to scrap Canada tariffs. Mitch McConnell of Kentucky and Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Rand Paul, also of Kentucky, will hopefully get on the Republican bandwagon. Went on to say, and fight the Democrats' wild and flagrant push to not penalize Canada for the sale into our country of large amounts of fentanyl by tariffing the value of this horrible and deadly drug in order to make it more costly to distribute and buy. Because fentanyl, much cheaper than heroin or any other drug. But it's really to get the trade balance in line. Hundreds of billions of dollars in trade deficits. That it doesn't need to be balanced completely, but it needs to be less than hundreds of billions of dollars. All right, on to the next story. Más importante. Zero Hedge is reporting Nashville police claim transgender Christian school shooter never had manifesto. Well, isn't that sweet? Nashville police went on to say, in this case, a manifesto didn't exist. Haley never left behind a single, now look at the wording here, a single document explaining why she committed the attack, why she specifically targeted the covenant, and why she hoped to gain, if anything, from the attack. Well, that's just false. And I'm going to prove that out in just a second. Let's go to just the news. So the Just the News headline for this story is Nashville police downplay religious and transgender elements of Covenant shooting in final report. Why would they do that? The Metro Nashville Police Department in their final report on Wednesday appeared to downplay the role that religion and gender played in the 2023 Covenant school shooting. We all know that had everything to do with it. And I believe that she was being controlled. So she had a minder, right? She was being run by somebody, obviously. So, like many of these other people that commit mass shootings, she had mental illness. You think? So let's go to this story. Haley notoriously slammed white privilege, women, Christianity in writings prior to the attack, but it wasn't a manifesto. With the shooter stating in one passage that she wanted to kill all you little crackers, bunch of faggots with your white privileges. Hale was also hoping for a high death count. The Nashville Police Department claimed in the final report that Hale's primary motivation was notoriety, and that neither the shooter's clear hatred for affluent white people or Christianity played any role in the picking of the Presbyterian school. Instead, Haley chose it because of the belief that killing children would get more attention. We're getting to the crux of the matter in just a second. All right, she's obviously has mental illness. Going to get to that. But the fact is motive is what motive does. So if you attack a children, she might attack a school because killing children might be easier and might get you notoriety. But why a Christian school? Why a predominantly white school? There's more details in One America News' headline. Nashville police final report, trans shooter Audrey Hale spent years planning attack. The report revealed that the now deceased shooter, Audrey Hale, 28, a biological woman who identified as a transgender man, going by he, him pronouns, had multiple notebooks, art sketchbooks, and computer documents that detailed the future attack plans. That's a manifesto. The police department said, well, it's not a manifesto because it wasn't a single document. So it's multiple manifestos. And a lot of these things, she expressed a lot of this online as well. Like I said, I think she was being handled. This is the most important part. This is straight from the report. Okay, so it goes on to say her therapist became concerned and recommended Hale take part in a psychological assessment at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Why? Which occurred in June 2019. So you have to get into the psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist. Mind control starts with people that are weak-minded, particularly, that already have mental illness. So people that already have mental illness will then be targeted. So they look for people that have mental illness, and they get targeted, and they see if they could tweak them. So going back to this document, based on records for the assessment, VUMC confirmed the mental health disorders Hale was already known to have and identified her with depression and anxiety as the largest aggravating factors. All right, I got to stop right there. So she was obviously treated with depression medication. All the antidepressants in the black box warnings confirm that they will cause, in some patients, suicidal or homicidal ideation. All right. We'll state that as a fact for now. Going back to this document, they made no mention of psychosis, which is the usual problem that drives people to kill, since this new drug-induced rampage, and noted Hale denied having any plans to harm herself or others, nor the means to do so. This is in 2019. Well, takes 5 years to ramp her up, I guess. They recommended she participate in an intensive outpatient program to address her mental state, which Hale, at her mother's urging, agreed to complete. So, pharmaceuticals. The program lasted 8 weeks, with Hale completing the program near the end of August 2019. While Hale participated in her IOP, her therapist retired, which led Hale acquiring a new therapist in the fall 2019. So she's crazy. She's on pharmaceutical drugs that could lead her to commit such an act. While shooting down the term manifesto, police most certainly emphasized that her motivations were scrambled across notebooks, among other writings that investigators found. They revealed an image finding more than 24 notebooks seized from Hale's car and bedroom. They also said that she had left a suicide note addressed to her parents. Okay, that's a manifesto. We obviously see somebody here with mental illness that went into a special psychiatric program for 8 weeks. This is where the mind control starts. You never want to go into a serious psychological treatment because that's where they start the ball rolling. So with her 8-week treatment in 2019, did she get better or she get worse? She got fucking worse. And because of the medication she was probably on, which they don't have no mention here or in the police report, they gloss over the real issues of her psychological problem, which was obviously pushed into transgenderism, pushed to kill, but there are no motivating factors. Well, there is a motivating factor. Her psychological treatment in 2019 resulted in a mass shooting in 2024. It's the same thing where they target weak-minded and already mentally damaged people to suggest to them maybe you're transgender. It's ridiculous. This girl, like many other smart school shooters, going all the way back to the first Aurora shooting, I forget what that guy was severely impaired. He was in a psychological program with his father and his father was also a psychologist in the Navy dealing with mind control programs. And then this guy dressed up as the Joker, all right, which is trigger, this in media has full of triggers. I'm not going to go down this road just yet to digress into that. But you have to understand how these people that are already weak-minded are selected for mind control, and then they're pushed further into the direction they're seeing if they're ripe for the picking, and then they're pushed to do what they do. If there was no intervention, they might not have done anything. And if you see that a lot with these mass shootings, you just happen to be talking online with XYZ, but there's nothing to see here. There's everything to see here. The Nashville police did not unravel the very culprits, which are the pharmaceutical companies and the psychiatric and mental health people intervention, not to mention common culture. They're like, oh, well, she wanted notoriety like other school shooters. She was mentally ill and driven to kill by pharmaceuticals and most likely other people that were there to trigger her assault. All right. Just the news. Moving on to other stories. Stay with me now. Same judge blocking CIA efforts to fire DEI employees hamstrung the Steele dossier prosecution. Judge Anthony Trenga, appointed to the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia again, by George Bush, blocked efforts by the CIA and the ODNI to terminate intelligence officers who had been tied to the so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts during the Biden administration. So, Trenga, the judge who also saw Durham's case against the Russian, what was the whole Russian collusion case, to unwind it, to find that it was really driven by the Democrats, and there was a big nothing burger, there was nothing there. But he also intervened in that case and didn't hold anybody responsible. I really wanted to go to this article next. It's in the wrong order. Fox News is reporting Trump admin freezes funding to Maine for letting trans athletes in girls' sports. More sanctions could be coming to the state in the next week or so. As I mentioned before, I have nothing against trans people or anybody else or furries, or as an adult, you can do whatever you want. I have no animosity towards the LGBTQ community. However, if you are a person that thinks who that is biologically a male, and you think you have a woman living inside you, born into the wrong body, so to speak, that's gender dysphoria and that's mental illness. So authorities should treat transgender people with that regard. Well, at least that in mind. So if a grown man, a man who went through puberty, a young man, high school, whatever, and you've went through puberty and all of a sudden you decide, I've got a woman living inside me, I want to let her out. No, you don't get to decide where you get to go and do and compete in girls' sports. You don't coddle people with their fringe ideas. You need to coddle the majority of mainstream opinion. That's what you need to do. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any countenance or any consideration for people that have fringe ideas. Sure. You want to give them consideration? I'm all for that. But you don't cut out the majority of opinion to pacify one fringe mentally ill idea. All right, you might have heard this news headline breaking from the Wall Street Journal. New York City Mayor Eric Adams to start his own political party for re-election campaign. The move comes after a federal judge dismissed bribery charges against the mayor. I don't care about Eric Adams, really. I think he's kind of funny. Is he good for New York? Is he not good? New York mayor needs to be tough on crime. I know that much. The fiscal picture of the city is dim, but when Rudy Giuliani was there, he was a prosecutor. He really cleaned up the city. I don't agree. I agree with the broken windows theory, but I don't agree with stop and frisk. Oh, as I mentioned yesterday, I don't believe in proactive policing. I believe policing should be reactive. I'm not saying that police presence can't deter crime. It can, but going around frisking people, it's a violation of your constitutional rights. The Associated Press. Hungary plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court as Netanyahu arrives despite warning. All right, here. Bear with me now. I'm back. I can't see what I'm doing here. I'm sorry. So the deal with this story with Hungary, all right, Viktor Orban wants to have Netanyahu, and we're trying to build, well, a lot of countries are trying to build a coalition against globalism, global courts, so on and so forth. So Hungary plans to withdraw from International Criminal Court in The Hague because they had charged Netanyahu. We had Benjamin Netanyahu here. I think they lose their credibility when there isn't a consensus on who should be charged with war crimes. All right, moving along to the New York Times, UK government would ban phones in schools. These parents stepped up. Oh, I'm sorry, the UK government wouldn't ban phones in schools. These parents stepped up. In Britain, amid growing evidence of harm to young people from extreme content online, a smartphone-free childhood campaign is going viral. I'm against cell phones, social media. It's all bad for you, makes you insular without your knowledge. The movement aligns with a broader shift in attitudes in Britain as evidence mounts of the harms posed on developing brains and adult brains by smartphone addiction and the algorithm-powered social media. In one survey last year, the majority of respondents, 69%, felt social media negatively affected children under 15. Indeed, nearly half of the parents said they struggled to limit the time children spent on their phones, without a doubt. Moving along, stay with me. Post-millennial FBI gagged worker who tried to warn Twitter Hunter Biden laptop story was real. House Judiciary on October 14, 2020, the day the report came out, the FBI told employees do not discuss the Biden matter. So the FBI was protecting the Biden family, and the laptop story, which described not only the lifestyle of the first son, but also laid out some details that the Biden family could very well have been involved in espionage, certainly pay-for-play information scheme, or access, selling access to the president. An internal FBI chat log newly obtained by the committee. This is the committee looking into what happened with the laptop, which was election interference. The FBI deliberately withheld information about the FBI having Hunter Biden's laptop for a year, and an ongoing criminal investigation involving the Biden family's corruption. Do not discuss the Biden matter. After the meeting, a senior FBI lawyer put a gag order on the analyst who worked for the FBI because he apparently was trying to communicate with Twitter at the time, and said the story is real. Don't listen to the FBI. More stories from the Daily Mail. The billionaire-filled city, so secretive it does not want outsiders to know that it exists. And then when they're talking about Bradbury, California, that's by design, since the millionaires and billionaires that live within the town's limits don't want anyone knowing about their enclave in the San Gabriel Valley. There are many small towns, and they're building more smart cities to be like Bradbury, not only to be an enclave for the rich and powerful, but to set it up in their technocracy in that state of being a 15-minute smart city. It goes on to say the town is so locked down that most of the public roads that abut its borders are dead ends that run straight into tall guarded gates with signs that read Royal Oaks and Bradbury Estates. In other words, there's nothing for strangers, public persons to do in the city. This is from space.com. Secretive Russian military satellites release mystery object into orbit. The classified Cosmos satellite trio has sparked intrigue in space tracking circles. And it believes that it released an object that could be used for a number of objectives, including military experiments such as satellite inspection or target practice, testing technology for docking or formation flying. It also could be a scientific payload or even the result of an unintentional fragmentation, which it might very well likely be. I have no problems with the Russians, but the Russians are gearing up for war. They don't trust Donald Trump. Do they want to end the war? I mean, Donald Trump is playing good cop to the Europeans bad cop. They don't know what to believe. France and Britain are sending soldiers into Ukraine. It's a bad situation. But it's all part of the globalists, right? The corporate multinational heads and owners who are trying to form the global community in the way they would like it. So global fascism, neo-feudalistic technocracy. All right, the Federalist. Colorado father helps to keep government from sterilizing his 14-year-old son. More trans news. So Colorado was able to bar the father from interfering because the child's mother and Cameron's ex-wife, Nancy Drake, used Colorado's affirmation-only legal structure to wage war against Cameron through the courts. Drake, who joined forces with an activist therapist, has been able to use government force to push the now 14-year-old boy into transition interventions, which, if pursued, have the power to sterilize, reduce brain development, and cause bone density issues, among other host of gruesome effects. We all know what transgenderism does, and for non-adults, I don't recommend it. I don't. First of all, 14-year-old isn't intellectually developed enough to make such decisions. And if a parent is helping this person or this child go down this road, they're both mentally disturbed, and it's child abuse. Postmillennial is reporting Alec Baldwin claims America is in pre-Civil War culture. Watching the show Civil War really reminded me just how very similar the state is now. So apparently Alec Baldwin decided to watch the very old documentary by Ken Burns, Civil War, and that made him think, so there was some sort of transference to today that he says now we're in a civil war. Because liberals and Democrats feel they have no common ground with conservatives. And that never used to be the case. Why? Is because they're part of a cult and they've been indoctrinated as such. Not only to demonize people like Donald Trump, specific individuals, but groups of individuals based on it's informed tribalism, which is innate in human beings. Don't like them. They don't believe how you believe. Do everything to stop them without trying to understand their point of view. You should always be balanced. I'm not even saying you need to be a moderate, but I understand where the liberal mindset comes from. I understand what people that want more spending want. I understand social issues, cultural issues. I get it. But if you don't balance your point of view, you become an extremist. And the way you're unbalanced is that when you hear somebody else saying a point of view or talking about a point of view you don't agree with, you get angry and visceral and you can't control yourself. I hear liberals talking. I don't freak out. I'm just like, okay, I don't agree with you, but okay. All right. I think we did it. A little early. It was kind of truncated. I got up late. Really late. I overslept like an hour. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to that trick. Please check out episode 111 of Tuesdays with Perry, where we discussed a bunch of stuff, including the recent special elections and other matters. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live streaming at 10 a.m. on Rumble. Check out my other website, libpop.org. Or check me out on social media, Twitter, X, Facebook, Getter, Minds, True Social. And I will see you tomorrow. Mañana. Respect.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
The new world order.
Look on me, bitch!